Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, WeatherTech, RockAuto.com, and State Farm. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to our MotorWeek podcast, 172. And we're sitting in Studio C in our MotorWeek World headquarters in Owings Mills, Maryland, around our, what did we decide this, a Keystone-shaped table. We have Brian Robinson, our writer-producer.
Happy to be here, John.
And also our motorcycle extraordinaire tester. Our online content coordinator, Greg Carlos.
That's me.
And our video producer and also editor, Joe Ligo.
Glad to be here.
Who is also the producer of the podcast, so you can blame this all on him.
I can't produce anything. Just say the word. He's a producer.
You know, what does a producer mean? He has to bring it all together.
A friend told me it's just a glorified mom.
No, well, that's true.
Yeah.
You bring
You just
all the
kinda-
pieces together.
you just
You're
kinda
just the guy
shepherd
that
people.
holds the clipboard while everyone else
and
is
makes
working.
the coffee,
Yeah.
I found out. Anyway, we have a lightning round, a viewer question, rant and raves, all of the normal features that we have on our podcast, but we're going to start off with some vehicles that have been around our shop of lately. The 2018 Audi A5 S-Line and also S5 Sportback. And who would like to dive in first? These are actually two very, very different cars.
I have to gush a little bit. I took the A5 S-Line for a weekend, and that's only a 4-cylinder. That thing was a blast to drive, to just really get on a straight, flat road and just get on it. It just, I don't know, it just loved to accelerate for a 4-cylinder. It was a lot of fun.
Well, it's a 4-cylinder turbo. I mean, it is kind of amazing the power we're getting out of
252 horses?
Out of 2 liters these days. They both they're different cars, but yet they're variations on a theme. They both have a coupe-ish profile. One, of course, is a 5-door and one's a coupe. It's interesting how we have bastardized the meaning of coupe, I guess.
No, I'm with you on that.
Yeah,
Well,
just like a coupe's not a coupe anymore.
And they call it a
Well, in
coupe,
this
and it's a
case,
5-door
it is,
hatch kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree with you there. But I think that the A7 pulls it off better than the A5 does. I think the A7's proportions are just better. It's more suited to have 4 doors in a coupe style. The A5 didn't really do it for me. They call it the Sportback. But I do enjoy having 4 doors. I've just always liked being able to have 4 doors and be able to throw, because I often, for whatever reason, have stuff with me.
In the back instead of not necessarily people.
If I can get that, that's great.
Dogs,
the S5 or the A5 coupe certainly looks better, but if you're looking for some utility, the Sportback has it.
Yeah, the A4 was our luxury sedan of the year, or sports sedan, which was, I guess, sports sedan.
Sports sedan.
Yeah, sports sedan.
And, these are just variations on that theme. The true coupe, which I thought looked pretty good.
It was a good looking car.
And then the Sportback, which we previously didn't get here in the U.S., so this is the first time that we've gotten the 5-door hatch here in the U.S. But both, great additions to an already a great car.
We didn't get it here for the primary reason that up until very recently, it didn't look like Americans were going to buy hatchbacks.
Right.
And now they've become more in vogue. I guess it's...
If you call them 4-door coupes, then people like them more.
all of a sudden
exactly.
more than a hatchback. The hatchback's like station wagon, dirty words.
I like the interior too. On the, I only drove the actual 2-door coupe, not the Sportback, but I like the interior on it. No wood. I like that they had I don't know if it's aluminum, but it felt like real metal, because when it was cold, it actually felt cold. But whatever the metal trim is, aluminum or nickel or whatever it is, that was
it was
metallized plastic.
It's true
It looks
aluminum
cool.
in the S-Line trim, and that another interesting thing. That was, I wouldn't say an ultra base car because it didn't have the S-Line trim package, but no wood trim. It was
pretty
and
pretty reasonably
but just
priced.
as fun as if you could spend a lot more and not get any more fun out of it. So
Have Audi, especially 4s and the 5s, have they replaced the BMW 3 Series as kind of like the benchmark for compact sports sedans? What do you think?
we certainly made that claim last year when we called the A4 sedan our best sports sedan. And I would say in most ways, yes. It's just the BMW has tried to be more luxurious, and which it has, but it's lost a lot. They rely too much on electronics, which they all do to a large extent, but
There's just something about the way that an Audi feels now that
Correct.
when you get into it, if you're looking for that driver connection, they seem to have that in spades. Moving on to our second vehicle. This is a vehicle that's gotten some controversy around the office, mainly because not all of us have driven all the variations. The new 2018 Volvo XC60, kind of like their smaller version of the XC90. It's in three versions: the T5, which is a 250 horsepower turbocharged 2-liter; the T6, which adds a supercharger to the turbocharger with 316 horsepower; and then the T8 we had in here at the office, and this is the cream of the crop, but it's 400 horsepower. However, it's turbocharged, supercharged, and of course it's a plug-in hybrid. And I gather from just discussions around the office that was not a favorite vehicle. A lot of people had some qualms with the T8. But let's talk about the XC60 in general. I think everyone agrees it's a great-looking vehicle. But go from there.
Yeah, if you like the XC90, which I think most people do, the XC60 you'll probably like even better because I think the proportions are actually even better. It sits a little bit low to the ground. And
it's a prettier vehicle.
It's more compact, yeah. There's really not a bad angle on that vehicle. There's a lot to like about the interior. It's presentable. The screen, which I'm not sure is it standard. That's a standard screen.
I believe Volvo tab.
I mean, it's even larger, I think, than the Tesla screen. I believe
it looks nice. A complaint would be that some of the menus and some of the buttons are a little bit small, especially for the clientele who's probably going to be buying a Volvo. But really good looking. I'll go to the negatives now. The shifter was one of the worst.
The E-shifter
was terrible.
Yeah.
So not only, and most of them, and maybe I was using it wrong, if you hold it back or forward longer, if you hold it forward, you go into reverse.
Mm-hmm.
If you hold it back, you go into drive. This one required you to double tap.
Yep, it did.
Which
it was
is
annoying.
Really, really annoying, and that's just bad. I can't defend it in any way.
I ended up in neutral more times than
Absolutely, because you just forget about it, and I'm sure once you drive it for a while,
you get used to it.
It seems like all these companies just fired their ergonomics people. Like
I just don't see the point.
It doesn't seem like there's an ergonomics engineer in sight when it comes to e-shifters. I really don't think so.
And more specifically on ours was the plug-in hybrid. It's great. I love the fact that they're going plug-in, but they need to sort out their braking system because it's basically impossible to come to a smooth stop with the brakes as they
grabby.
are. Yeah.
And I don't recall that the rest of the staff hasn't driven the 5 and 6. I have. I recall those vehicles as having very smooth brakes, typical of the XC90. So it may be specifically to the regenerative braking system. But I think they've got another gangbusters on their hit, and they're also pricing it very, very competitively. We've had a couple of people write us and tell us what they've been able to buy XC60s at, and they're really astounding. It's like they're certainly not luxury car prices, way under that. So
Made in China.
Huh?
Made in China.
A lot of it, especially the engine. So both those vehicles that we talked about today, the A5 and the S5 Sportback, are all three of them, and the XC60 are on near-term shows.
Yeah,
from
they'll be on the
MotorWeek.
show soon, and they go up to YouTube the week after. So if you miss
Almost
the
immediate.
show, yeah, you
have
can
no
catch
reason
it.
to miss it.
No excuses.
Also, you can watch full episodes of MotorWeek on the pbs.org/MotorWeek site. But, Joe, you've got something special coming up in a show. This is an outgrowth of something that Joe has a passion for, and that is old muscle cars, in many cases cars that have been forgotten. So we're running the first of a new historical segment called Muscle Car Memories, in which Joe is not only the producer, but he's also the voice. So why don't you tell us what people are going to see on this first episode?
Right. So this was something John and I kind of came up with called Muscle Car Memories, and we wanted to focus on muscle cars that aren't already done to death. So we kind of said from the beginning.
No GTOs.
Right. We said,
no Boss Mustangs.
Right. Let's hold off on the well-known ones and focus on some lesser-known stuff. And what better way to start than with a 1969 American Motors AMX, a two-seat muscle car.
Two-seat.
And a little bit bizarre, but a lot of fun to drive and a pretty fascinating history behind it. So the first segment is a combination of driving impressions and history of the car, and even some pricing information for somebody who might want to go out and buy one. So hopefully,
is it on your wish list?
Yeah, I mean, if I was one of those guys that had a shed full of like 20 cars, it'd probably be one of the 20.
We have to tell everybody what you drive.
Well, sure. See, I can't afford an AMX on my salary, but I did buy
Is that a plea?
Yeah, really.
I did buy an AMC Ambassador, which
and
is
then
a
took
big,
the rear seats out. So
yeah. It's a big sedan, but it has the same motor as the AMX. It just has an extra 2 tons of steel with it. But no, back to the segment, Muscle Car Memories. It was a lot of fun. A big thanks to the owner who let me borrow it. His name, we'll just call him Homer. He was a cool guy. Let me drive his car. And, yeah, fascinating history, a lot of fun to drive, and looking forward to driving a lot of other old muscle cars that are maybe lesser known. Oldsmobiles, Plymouths, Buicks,
We've got some other things that we're thinking about.
I didn't realize this was going to be a recurring segment. Glad to hear.
Yeah. Bring about. We don't do sometimes enough on Motor Week of some of the great classic cars of our memories, not going back just even to the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so this will be a nice addition to the show. Thank you very much, Gerald.
Yeah, looking forward to
looking forward to episode number 2 already. Okay, our lightning round is here, and it's time to respond to something that we picked up in the news, and Joe picked this one up.
Yes.
Celebrity wrestler John Cena.
John Cena!
Doing the hand wave.
Can't see me.
Is being sued by Ford Motor Company for buying a new Ford GT supercar and then selling it in less than a month later. Ford requires GT owners to sign a contract saying that they will keep the cars a minimum of 2 years. Since John Cena is a well-known social media personality, Ford is seeking, quote, damages for loss of brand value, brand ambassador activity, and customer goodwill, close quote. Should car companies be allowed to dictate how their cars are sold and what owners do with them, or is Ford being overly controlling? Anyone? I mean, you do sign a contract when you buy something like that. You didn't have to buy it, and Ford set some pretty strict rules on it. So it seems to me that you should abide by the contract, whether that's the right thing to do or something else. You didn't have to buy the car. Any other comments?
Yeah, the whole point was to keep people from just buying them and flipping them and making money off of it.
Right,
they
which he probably did.
They wanted to put these in the hands of people that really wanted the car to have the car and drive the car, not people just looking to make a buck. So I applaud him for sticking to that.
I do too. I mean, ordinarily, I would say, it's once you buy something, it's your business. But this was a special vehicle in a special situation. Joe, did you have a comment, or you just want to hit the bell?
I just want.
Everybody gets their 30 seconds.
Everybody gets their. So my 30 seconds on the matter. I'd say, I think Ford planned with who they sold these cars to get a lot of free advertising on these people's Facebook and Twitter and Instagrams and stuff. And so I understand why they're seeking lost.
That's why they didn't sell me one.
Right. They're seeking lost advertising, basically. And so I understand that. But at the same time, I think what John Cena did was kind of like a lame thing to do. But at the same time, maybe taking him to court isn't the best PR move.
Well, but they probably had a situation where if they didn't do something, then everybody else would feel free to do it too. They had to set
an example.
Set an example. Greg, any comment?
Yeah, I would have to side with Ford as much as I don't like siding with big corporations.
America.
But I mean, you signed a contract, you knew what you're getting into, and to John Cena's credit, I don't think he's really fighting it a whole lot. He's like, yes, I sold it for a profit. He allegedly said he was going to pay them like 70-some grand for initial damages, but then Ford says he didn't pay them back. So I think that's kind of what the current issue is. So,
well, you're up on this issue.
Yeah, well, I just read up.
You love your wrestling, don't you?
I do. I'll get me some wrestling.
Well, it's one thing to basically hold somebody to task, but there is a limit, maybe, on how far.
Yeah, it'll be. I'm sure, like everything else now, it'll just go way too far and get everybody's attention for too long.
If Ford gives me a GT, I'll post about it on Twitter every day. All 12 of my followers.
We'll see it. Okay, viewer question time. Andre, and we have to admit, Andre, we had to truncate your question a little bit because it went on quite a ways. But Andre says, I've watched your shows since I was a kid in the 80s. You are my go-to for car tests. Thank you, Andre, very much.
I read that as go-kart somehow. I don't know how I saw
Well,
go-karts.
our selective dyslexia is working again today. I'm moving from Atlanta, Georgia to Palm Springs, California. Okay, no more ice and more heat, though. He wants to trade his Audi TT in for something more practical. He's looking at, and there's a long
It's
list
a
of cars
huge
here.
list.
A lot of Hyundai Kia. I see.
Hyundai Ioniq.
Actually, it's all
Kia
basically
Niro,
Hyundai Kia.
Hyundai Elantra Sport, Kia Soul Turbo, Kia Stinger, even a Genesis G70. Okay, he wants something fun to drive, good looks, practicality, but here's a kicker. He says, I might drive for Uber or Lyft with the car. And then he also adds, money isn't too big a concern for me. Well, I'm very fortunate for you,
Well, if you're
Andre.
moving to Palm Springs, yeah, I
he's
guess.
open to other suggestions. What do we think of his
boy.
suggestions, and what do we think he probably ought to buy himself, especially if he's talking about something fun to drive, and it might be for Uber?
I find it odd that money's no object. He's coming from an Audi, and everything he lists is from Korea.
It's like way cheaper.
Well, maybe
But-
he's looking for ultra
I
reliability.
mean, Kia
too.
would love to hear that because they've been trying to make better Audis for years now. So I think he would love to hear that.
Well, Benny D is going to say Kia Soul Turbo because that's like always his
Pretty
thing.
cool
I do like that too, but
And it's
again,
not bad
the whole
for Uber. You
the
got
whole
the hatch
money
for
no
people's-
option thing. Everything's going through my mind right now. Let's just say let's keep it to these. I could see why you'd get a Soul maybe if you want some utility, but honestly, there's not a ton of room for. So if you're hauling people around an Uber, they're not going to be super happy with you.
Most people want Uber to be comfortable.
Yeah,
That's why
and
they're paying the
if you
money.
went Genesis G70, that's basically a Stinger, right?
Right.
You might even be able to get into Uber Black territory and pull in some higher fares. I'm not totally sure how that all works. Never driven Uber, but that would certainly
Yeah, if you have a
keep some
luxury
customers
car, you're
happy.
allowed to choose your customers. or
And that
something.
actually brings up a very important point. He's moving to Palm Springs. Most people that live in Palm Springs are fairly well off, and if they're not fairly well off, they like to pretend that they are. Why don't you look at something else, something unusual, something that makes you stand out as a driver?
Not a
And
Tesla. Do
one
not buy a
does
Tesla
not-
because they're like Camrys in California.
Well,
Yeah.
the one that strikes me that he should consider is the Alfa Romeo Stelvio. Something unusual, a good-looking vehicle. It's an Alfa Romeo. It, on the other hand, is a practical utility with a big hatch and a decent cargo area in the back. Admittedly, it's not the roomiest in the second row seat, but it's okay.
If you're just hauling people around for 15-minute trips,
Yeah.
you could
It
probably
certainly
Something
gives off,
like that.
It gives off a premium vibe from the
Yeah.
outside too, and that's what that's a pretty big deal, I'm sure, for people in Palm Springs rolling up to, I don't know, wherever they're going. They want to look good.
What if he's Ubering? What about some kind of like Lexus hybrid, RX hybrid or
I think
ES
they'd be
hybrid or something
fine
like that?
choices. Probably pretty common out there. Where I
Yeah,
was trying
also.
to give him something that would be unusual, but yeah.
Right,
so
yeah.
I mean, definitely, if I was calling an Uber and he showed up in a Lexus, I'd say okay.
This is-
especially if it's Uber Black.
Right.
I'm getting my money's worth. Andre, I hope that helps. All of your choices were actually pretty good ones. If you want to, in my opinion, of the ones you said, I'd be looking at something like the Kia Stinger or the Genesis G70 of your particular list, just to make a good impression if you're going to be an Uber driver. And thanks for all the great comments about the show. It's loyal viewers like you that keep us on the air. Rant and raves, folks, before we close out this edition of our MotorWeek podcast. Anything that has struck you lately that you want to talk about, good or bad, in the automotive world?
I was going to
the
say, I haven't heard
silence
much
falls.
talk around the office about the Tesla press event from a couple weeks ago. Like, good or bad.
Because we weren't there? Or
Well, no, just that, everybody seems to have an
which
opinion
one?
on
Now?
it.
Thanks for
But
the reminder.
There's been actually several. Are you talking
just
about
got
the
over
sports
it.
car?
I'm talking
and-
about the semi-truck and the
And the sports
roadster event
Okay.
that they did. And I was surprised by almost the non-reaction from my coworkers. But, everybody knows I'm a Tesla fan.
Well,
so
why
that's
don't
not
you
really
why don't you
Why don't
tell
you
us what
fill
you
us
thought
in?
about it? And I'll tell you what I thought.
The vehicles are really cool, but I can't help but feel like they were just doing it to like boost stock prices and distract from how bad they're.
Doesn't sound like Tesla at all.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, I think it's a sleight of hand to distract how far behind they are with the Model 3.
Anybody that knows anything about Tesla knows that their first car was a Roadster. It was based on a Lotus, and they did it, and we tested it, and we liked the car, and so it's like, okay, so now you're going to do an exotic car, basically. That's what the $250,000 is for. Okay, but right now you're having trouble building your mass production car. I wonder if you shouldn't be concentrating more on that. As far as the Semi, there's a lot of work being done by the trucking industry with all-electric semis. They sound like a great idea until you start loading up, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 pounds of cargo and trying to struggle it around, because in that case it's going to take an awful lot of batteries. And you wonder, here's a fellow that's basically been doing light-duty vehicles, and the trucking industry has been working very hard on this. He might have had a magic bullet when it came for cars, but I'm wondering if he's not actually trying to overreach when it comes to tractor trailers. But having said that, it's very difficult to doubt anything that Elon Musk sets his mind to. But yeah, I think it was a little bit of diversion away from his current problems.
I think the company's going to get indigestion. They need to focus on one thing at a time.
What's your opinion of what's going on now with the Model 3? Does anybody think that it's really dire? Do they think he's going to pull it off? Or what? You're the Tesla expert. What do you think?
I think it's a case of just that they're trying to do too much, and they need to. The thing that Tesla's great at is designing really cool futuristic cars. They're not great at manufacturing.
Well, but the Model S and the Model X are excellently built. I mean, we've all been shocked at, as the rest of the press has, about how good those cars are. Granted, they're six-figure automobiles in many cases.
Yeah, I just think it's it comes back to, like I said, that indigestion thing. I just think they're going to choke on too much opportunity. I would say focus, and get your production up. Then devote resources to these newer projects.
I think 6 months from now, if he's able to actually start churning out Model 3s in a decent number and start satisfying the many hundreds of thousands, isn't it, people that put
400,000 plus.
I think everybody will be ready to talk about some of the other aspects he's got.
Right.
And I guess since I've been a doubter on his automotive efforts from the beginning, and now I've become like, wow, he's a pretty amazing guy. Yeah. I think he'll do it. I think it's going to take a little bit longer than he predicted, which is typical for him.
It's not like any of us want him to fail. Or
no.
At least, I'm speaking for myself
absolutely
mostly,
not.
But I'm assuming the rest of you guys
there are
don't
a lot
want
of people out
fail.
there that probably do, but I don't think an auto enthusiast can be among that. So good luck, Mr. Tesla. Let's get the Model 3 right. And,
I knew you would have a strong opinion on it, John, so that's why I was glad I could open that can
I
of
thought I've
worms.
been very wishy-washy myself. I've been, not the strongest advocate, but not a big detractor either. And that kind of brings to a close the traction that we have for this MotorWeek podcast number 172. I want to thank Brian Robinson, Greg Carlos, and Joe Ligo for all of their support and input today, for the lively show that we produced, and for audio engineer Jim Bigwood making sure that it gets out to everybody that is listening. And by the way, our MotorWeek podcast is also available for you to view. Our podcast creator, Bob Mixter, is the one responsible for getting this whole thing off the ground, and we thank Bob as well. To all of you, you can watch our weekly editions of MotorWeek on most public television stations. Go to our MotorWeek website, motorweek.org, for information as to where, and also daily news updates and the first impressions from most of the new models that we drive. And you can also watch our show beginning every Tuesday night with a new episode on the Velocity Cable channel. To all of our advertisers, thank you as well. Till next time, I'm John Davis. Thanks for watching and just simply being a part of MotorWeek.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, WeatherTech, RockAuto.com, and State Farm. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.